Going to hand it over to a colleague here to do some introductions. Andy, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy Cruz. I'm a program specialist with the Risk Mitigation Center, and I'd like to welcome you today to our presentation, Leadership Development, Building Your Agency's Leadership Bench. I would also like to introduce David Tucker. He's a subject matter expert giving the presentation today. He is just an expert on all things community action. He's been an executive director of agencies in Vermont as well as a state office director. And he has well over 20 years of experience, even more than that, with community action. So I think you will find this presentation extremely useful. He's an extremely knowledgeable presenter, and it's well worth your time, so we're definitely happy to have you here. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Mr. Tucker, and he can get started.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Good morning and or good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you are. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody today, and thanks for joining in on sort of an overview of developing leadership capacity within community action agencies. And what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk a little bit about why should we do this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the leadership development cycle, which might help to sort of frame how you think about leadership development in your organization. And we'll also have some tips about how to get started, about how to move ahead in developing a leadership program within your agency. I wanted to start just by mentioning something that Peter Drucker, the management guru, and anyone who has been involved with Roma training at all certainly knows the name Peter Drucker. And Peter Drucker points out that one does not manage people, that the task is really to lead people, and the goal is to make productive the specific strengths and knowledge of every individual. Peter Drucker really felt that you sort of manage projects or programs, but that you lead people, and that's really at the heart, I think, of leadership development within a community action agency. So why do we want to do this? We want to do it as part of and as a complement to succession planning. That if you combine sort of succession planning with individual positions with a leadership development program, you can really help prepare an agency for any unexpected departure of key staff, while also increasing the capacity of the organization to adapt to change. It really helps to make an organization more resilient and more sustainable. And it really involves more long-term strategic thinking. Let's see if we can get moving here. There we go. It also helps to build agency capacity and the capacity of individual employees. Helps to strengthen the human resources within the organization. It can help you tap the intellectual capital in the organization. I know in probably every organization there are some hidden talents or sleepers within the organization, and this is a way to help bring out that capacity within the organization that might not otherwise be realized. It can also help employees sort of realize their career plans within the organization and keep people looking towards the future and what they might contribute to the agency further on down the road. It can help improve employee morale by giving employees a way to better themselves and to be challenged by new opportunities within the organization. And it also helps in terms of the organization. It allows the organization to respond to the changing environmental demands and changing funding requirements and political requirements that we all have to deal with. Internal leadership is, there we go, we can get this to move, there we go. It's a key component of a risk mitigation strategy. So it's really a way to, again, make the organization more sustainable, more stable, and really more strategic in its outlook on the future. As you all probably know, the new organizational standards require the development of succession plans. However, leadership development really enables an agency to create succession plans for positions throughout the organization, a much deeper look at succession planning and a much deeper look throughout the organization. Let's see if I can, oh, there we go. So what's the difference between succession planning and leadership development? Succession planning is really a form of risk assessment, really sort of figuring out what is the agency's current bench strength, sort of where is it likely that people might be leaving the organization, or where are we vulnerable in terms of key employee leaving the organization. But leadership development is much more proactive. It's a really risk prevention or risk mitigation. It's about, as I mentioned before, it's about cultivating the talent in the agency through planned development activities. And it's not a one-time event, and that's what I'll talk about a little bit later. It's an ongoing process within the organization. So what do you need to have for to develop a leadership program? First of all, you need a commitment to establishing the program. You need to assess sort of where you are today, what's going on today in terms of present work and people needs. You need to take a look to the future. What kind of strategic initiatives does the agency have planned, and what might be needed in the future? You need to establish a leadership development program. You need a way to identify and develop individual talents within the organization. And you need to evaluate individuals and the program. And another way to think about all of those factors is a leadership development cycle. And again, if you've been involved in Roma training at all, this looks somewhat familiar. It is a cycle of sort of what is required to establish and maintain a leadership development program within an organization. And it starts with a commitment to leadership continuity. Again, assessing sort of where you are today, what are the present work and people needs, what are our future work and people needs, and designing a program that sort of addresses those needs, identifying and developing individual talent, and then evaluate individuals and the program. Again, evaluate sort of what are the results of that program, what works, what doesn't work, and then making that commitment to leadership continuity on an ongoing basis. So let's start by, if I can get this to work, I'm having loads of fun here. So let's start with making the commitment to leadership continuity and a leadership development program. You really need the support of the executive director and the board to make a leadership development program work. Without really buy-in from the executive director and the board, a leadership development plan won't work. It takes a real commitment of resources, time, and money to make the program work. So again, this isn't sort of a one-time, one-shot endeavor. It's really an ongoing effort. In committing to a leadership development program, you really need to think about what basic philosophical principles should guide the program. What do we believe about the nature of management in our agency? What do we believe about the value of preparing management employees to do their jobs? These are questions that I think the executive director and the board should really think about, talk about, and really make some decisions about in committing to a leadership development program. What should the program's purpose be? What is the chief reason we're trying to develop this program? Again, a discussion with the executive director and the board is really important. And then what should the program's goals be? What do we hope to achieve from this program? We have to make sure that once we get a program up and running, that we have a way to evaluate whether or not it's being successful and it's meeting the goals that we've established. You may want to develop a program mission statement. This is one that we crafted from several that we've seen, but certainly you could tailor one to fit your organization. And this mission statement just says that the purpose of our leadership development program at our community action agency is to ensure that the agency has leaders within the agency ready to assume key positions that may come open. The opportunity to participate in leadership development activities is available to all employees on an equal opportunity basis. So again, that sort of sets the overall philosophy and framework for a leadership development program. But you also want to sort of develop a policy framework that talks about how a leadership development program fits within the organization and what's sort of underlying that leadership development program. ones that we've seen talk about developing a culture that focuses on leadership, teamwork, and innovative thinking. So it sets some of the parameters of what you'd like to achieve with a leadership development program. And it says that the organization supports those efforts with the resources required. And you can detail what those resources might be. And it's important to recognize, again, among the executive director and the board, at a minimum, that leadership development takes place on 3 different levels. That there's an agency level, a program level, and an individual level. You next want to sort of broaden that a little bit and really describe how you're going to achieve those goals. What action should be taken to develop the plan? Who's responsible? When will it take place? Is this something we're going to do right away? Is this something we're going to think about for a while? Where will it take place? Is this throughout the organization? Is this an administrative function? How and where will this work? And then it's really important to communicate the action plan. That's a critical piece of it that I'll talk a little bit more about. So you really have to answer sort of 5 questions if you want to make sure that a leadership development program is sustainable. You have to decide, where will it be within the agency structure? Is this an administrative function? Is this a team of senior managers? Is this an ad hoc committee of the organization that's going to help oversee this? Who's going to be responsible for the overall oversight of the program? And how will that person or those persons be selected, oriented, and trained? How are you going to get this up and running and make sure it's able to move forward? Are you going to provide incentives to staff who choose to engage in leadership development? Will there be incentives? Will there be additional training? What kind of incentives might be available? And how are you going to budget this? Is this out of discretionary funds? Is this program-specific funds? Are these other sources of funds that you might be able to tap into? But really think about how you're going to pay for this and how you're going to be able to maintain it. And then also important to think about what kind of records of the activities. How are you going to keep track of this? How are you going to document what has happened and what progress people are making? So these are all things to consider when you're making a commitment to a leadership development program. You don't necessarily have to have all of these details worked out at the get-go, but you certainly have to really think about these things and have a good idea and a good framework for how you want to proceed. So the next thing you want to do is to assess the present work and people needs. So you want to take a look at sort of where are we today. And there's a couple of ways to do that. You can take a look at individual positions and take a look at what their impact on the agency would be if that position is vacant, and then do some sort of an assessment of what the risk is for that position to become vacant. You can take a look at vacancy risk by retirement for sort of categories of employees. And then you can take a look at sort of what your existing bench strength is by position. So you want to identify where key leadership positions exist. You want to clarify what are the competencies needed for the future if the agency is to achieve its strategic objectives. And you want to identify individuals who would be difficult to replace due to unique talents or specific knowledge. So it could be someone in the IT department who knows how to fix computers when it's needed or make the system work. Could be someone in HR who has a particular unique skill. So it's not necessarily only the executive director or the CEO that you want to look at, or the chief financial officer. It can be other positions within the organization that might be very, very difficult to replace. So you can take a look at one way to look at sort of the individual position impact is to sort of look at a grid like this, where it could be, let's just say it's the weatherization director, who is the person in that position. What do they do? What kind of responsibilities do they have? And what kind of authority do they have? And how are they involved in strategic objectives? Is the agency looking at expanding weatherization as an entrepreneurial activity? Are they looking to expand weatherization into other kinds of energy efficiency objectives? Is that person involved in those kind of activities? Are they retirement eligible anytime soon? That doesn't mean they will retire. Doesn't mean you want to kick them out the door, but it does mean that it could be a possibility if someone is retirement eligible today that that you may want to begin to prepare someone to assume a leadership position in that department. What is their marketability? Is this a position that other community action agencies or other nonprofit agencies might be interested in hiring this person away? Is this a key skill that a lot of other organizations don't have, or that folks in the private sector might want? Is this someone who might be lured away from the agency by other organizations? Other factors, life events. I know people my age often have to deal with aging parents and might need to take leaves of absence to attend to family matters. Is that a factor with that position? And then you can do sort of an overall vacancy risk. Is this a key critical position of someone who will be retirement eligible soon and may have aging parents? Is their vacancy risk high, medium, or low? So you can do an assessment that way to sort of determine whether or not those key positions are really at risk of someone vacating that position. Another thing you can do is sort of look at categories of employees. And here's one. This is a way to sort of give a broader picture of the agency's overall potential needs. And it can really help you sort of focus or target a leadership development program. In this example here, and this is from a pretty large agency, where we looked at over 2/3 of senior leadership was retirement eligible within the next year and a half. So that tells you something there. That, again, it doesn't mean those people necessarily will retire in the next year and a half. It doesn't mean we want to kick them out the door by any stretch of the imagination. But it means that that's something to be concerned about, or at least consider when we're developing a leadership development program. And we also note that in senior management, over half of the senior managers will be retirement eligible through the end of 2016. So within the next year and a half or so, you have the potential of a lot of senior level staff in the organization becoming retirement eligible. So it's something to keep in mind when designing a program. You can also take a look at sort of the bench strength by position. And the example here is a Head Start director. So in the Head Start program, how many staff could be ready to assume, at least on a temporary basis, the job of the Head Start director? How many staff could be ready within the next year? How many could be ready within the next 2 years? How about within the next 3 to 5 years? So it's a way to look within programs and take a look at sort of what are the leadership development needs within that particular program. So it can, again, it can help you focus leadership development efforts on a program by program level. So it really gives you a picture of sort of where you are today. So the next thing you want to do is, okay, so we know where we are today. What are some of the future work and people needs that we might need? You want to take a look at the future work requirements and competencies to align with the agency's strategic direction. Well, you want to ask questions like, will we be engaged in new strategic endeavors? Will we be focused on developing new community partnerships? Will we be pursuing social enterprise initiatives? Will we be increasing our advocacy efforts? Will we be focusing on a few critical community needs? So again, that can help you figure out what kinds of leadership development efforts you might want to undertake. So where do we want the agency to be in X number of years? What kinds of things will we be doing? What skills and talents will we need to get us there? What IT and data management skills will we need? What process management skills might we require? And what communication skills will we depend on? So trying to look down the road. And what skills and talents will we need when we get there? I'm sure your experience is the same as mine, is that program development can require a different set of skills than program management. Some people have real strengths in the development phase of an initiative, while others are better able to maintain program operations. What personnel or management skills will we need? What data analysis and performance measurement skills will we require to maintain programs? What will be different when we have programs underway and up and running? So sort of one way to categorize that or organize that is to just construct a grid something like this, where you can look at the strategic plan and include any strategic endeavors or new strategic initiatives. The example I've used here is housing. It's an agency that has decided it's going to go into the low-income housing area and develop housing. So you need some specific skills to get things up and running. You need to know about low-income housing tax credit programs. You need to know how to write grants. You need to know how to work with communities to find sites that will work. You need to learn and know how to work with developers to get a project up and running. So once the project is up and running, you really need project management skills. You need tenant relation skills. You need a different set of skills once the program is up and running. So in developing a leadership development program, you really want to be thinking that kind of long-term overview of what you're trying to do. So you've got succession planning to sort of meet immediate needs, but again, you want to develop a leadership program that really looks far into the future and is as strategic as possible. So you want to take some time thinking through those things. So then you get to a point where now what do? We want to start to get moving. So we figured out where we are and where we want to be. So we want to establish the program. So we want to just, again, make sure that we've got the agency commitment, that we've got a big picture or roadmap to guide the effort, that we've got what some of our immediate needs are and what some of our longer-term needs are. We've sort of figured out what kind of skills, what kind of attributes, what kind of leadership qualities we're going to need to develop or we want to develop. And then we need to write policies and procedures to guide the program, really a pragmatic framework for how the program will operate. Typically, agencies have two agency departments involved. Have HR or similar kind of program, could be administrative staff to create the tools and the processes associated with leadership development, and then a group of managers to assure that the process is being followed and progress is being made. So you need someone to help set up the framework, and then you need folks involved in monitoring, following the process, and staying on top of how the program is operating. So a key piece, it'll come up here in a second, is to establish measurable goals and program priorities. All good Roma students know that you need to be able to measure what you're trying to achieve and establish priorities for the program. Prepare an action plan to guide the program. Critical is to communicate the action plan, is to make sure folks within the agency know what's going on, know what to expect. And then train those involved in the program so that they can manage the program over time and help to develop leadership within your organization. I want to talk a little bit about communicating the leadership development program. It's really the responsibility of the executive director to communicate that plan, and it can help to further stress his or her commitment to the leadership development program. Some staff may be threatened to learn of such an initiative, but a leadership program really can provide high potential individuals an avenue to improve themselves while simultaneously serving as a motivator to them. A fully implemented leadership development program can also positively impact employee retention. The sharing of the plan should be done with all staff together, if possible, to assure that everyone hears the same message and is equally invited to express interest in developing his or her skills or expressing his or her concerns. So it can be presented to everyone as an opportunity, but really recognizing that some folks can be threatened by this, that if they don't participate or aren't active in this, that somehow it'll speak badly of them. So it's got to be presented as an opportunity and open to people as they are interested or show a desire to participate. So the next stage is to identify and develop individual talent. So to really identify and develop folks within the agency. You need to determine what is your assessment process, conduct assessment of the individuals, obviously, and then really come up with sort of an agency leadership grid for the agency. So we'll go through those stages briefly here anyway. You need to determine who to involve in the first phase and how those individuals will work to develop skills. Is this a strictly voluntary? Is this a program that staff can apply to participate in? Is this a program that senior managers and or supervisors can recommend staff to participate in? How are folks going to get involved with this, and how are they going to work to develop those skills? We really recommend creating an individual development plan, including goals on how to address meeting those goals, and then developing a system to monitor and supervise that plan. And then setting up a system to monitor and evaluate not only the individuals in the program and their progress on the individual development plan, but also the program as a whole. So in looking for individual talent, you want to think about what are some of the traits of high-performance leaders. And high-performance leaders have a strong record of performance with proven results. They've been successful. They've been able to influence people across the organization. They're not stuck only in one program, but tend to be able to see benefits or understand the organization as a whole. They have strong interpersonal skills. They have high emotional intelligence, including empathy. They're active listeners. They have strong communication skills, both verbally and in writing. They have a lot of drive, initiative, or ambition. They're not the kind of people who say, well, that's not my job, I'm not going to do it. They sort of look for new challenges or opportunities and have expressed a desire or an interest in learning to grow and develop their skills. They're able to create and articulate agency vision and strategy. They can set a direction, execute objectives, and really, again, have a sense of the total agency and not just one tiny component of it. And do their strengths and talents match the strategic direction of the agency? So those are the kinds of folks that we would be looking for to really target for leadership development. You can use, there are sort of formal assessment instruments that you can use to assess people's skills and abilities, but you can also, and I think probably more importantly, is to really do an internal review. You can get opinions of senior management. You can get opinions and judgment from immediate supervisors, and you can use performance appraisals as a piece of that assessment. And we also really recommend using a 360 review, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but really getting a perspective from peers, co-workers, direct reports, supervisors, and others about an individual as a way to really help assess individual talent and help plan for leadership development programming. So you want to identify candidates using as consistent and objective criteria as you can. So you really want to set up a systematic approach to really encouraging people to participate. You want to diagnose their strengths and weaknesses with the emphasis on their strengths and make sure those align with the organization's needs. You want to make sure you have the right development to build the competencies that's needed in the organization, that the individual strengths match the organization's needs, and you have programs, strategies, development plans that will help people enhance those skills and build those skills. And you want to monitor the process on an ongoing basis to make sure the program is being effective. It's really, again, it's a continuous process to really identify and focus on future leaders within the organization. So you want to find out what talents the individuals possess. You want to focus on their strengths rather than their weaknesses. You want to bring in an appreciative inquiry approach to this. And you want to remember and recognize that individuals can be used as a mentor for others to develop their strengths. So even folks who may not be interested in participating in an ongoing full-blown leadership development for themselves, they may be very helpful as mentors for other folks who want to be involved in such an effort. So mentoring, coaching is really a tool that can work both ways in a leadership development program. People involved in the program can definitely benefit from mentoring and coaching, but also they can be mentors or coaches for other folks. So it's really something to take a look at. You want to look at their future potential. How do their talents match the needs of the strategic plan? Again, what kinds of new initiatives are you going to be engaged in? A lot more advocacy in the future. Is that a skill or a talent that you want to try to nurture and try to develop? And how is this person as an advocate? And you want to try to get to the largest extent possible. You want to get an objective process to assess. It's not just performance reviews, although they can certainly be a part of it. They're not really, it shouldn't be based solely on that, because that tells you how someone has done in the past. It tells you how they perform, but that's only one piece of it. I mentioned before that one of the things that we recommend is a 360 review, and this is a 360 review tool that is available through the Building Your Leadership Bench toolkit on the partnership website. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes to go through it rather briefly so you get an idea of how it works. Again, if you're interested in this or want to find out more about it, it is available on the partnership website in that Batter Up Building Your Leadership Bench toolkit. And it really focuses on these areas. It focuses on 6 areas: on self-knowledge, on not being afraid to make and admit mistakes, have confidence in someone's ability and judgment in their role as a leader, coping with change. Does someone adapt well to change? Do they anticipate and plan for change? Are they willing to take risks? Vision. Are they able to communicate a vision and have a clear vision of the program and agency? Do they anticipate the future and potential responses? Mentoring. Are they able to motivate people? Do they show respect for others regardless of their position? Do they give feedback to others that is constructive? Team building. Are they able to help people see how their work contributes to the overall program or agency? Are they able to create a trusting work environment? Do they include others in planning? And executive or organizational skills, how's their verbal and written communication? Are they able to make decisions? Are they able to keep their department staffed or work with staff in their department? Are they able to manage projects effectively? So it's taking a look at those kinds of things. And it's really looking at other people's perceptions and having someone assess their own skills and abilities in those areas. And ideally, you'd have 4 to 8 people You would want the supervisor, perhaps the executive director, peers, mentors, partners, direct reports. You really want to ask the individual for people whose opinions that person respects or values. So you have them help you select sort of who they would like to get an assessment of. And those assessments are kept confidential and just reported in a format somewhat like this. This is Pollywog's Levels of Leadership Assessment. And Pollywog's rating of herself is in the blue, and in the maroon are her raters, are the 4 to 8 people who assessed here. And the way to use a tool like this is to really have a discussion, in this case with Pollywog, about those differences, that she thinks she has a very clear vision and is able to express it, and her raters don't think that as much. So it's a discussion with her about why she thinks that might be, what she might be able to do to improve that area, if that's an area she would like to improve. And you go through all of those areas in the same sort of discussion. You can see that Pollywog's assessment of her ability to adapt to change is pretty much the same as her raters. So that may be an area that she feels pretty comfortable with and won't want to focus on. We also have another one here that's sort of the opposite in that, again, Billy Boy's responses are in blue and his raters' assessments are in maroon, and he doesn't think he's as good in vision as his reports, as the people who rated him. So again, you'd have a discussion with Billy Boy about why he thinks that is. Does he know that people think he expresses a vision for the organization? And you also might want to talk about team building, where he got a super high score and he doesn't see himself in that way as much. So it might be an area to talk with him about and let him develop those skills even more and sort of recognize that's a capacity that he has. In terms of the executive or organizational skills, you could look at this in a slightly different way and really sort of look at those specific skills like communication, budgeting, making decisions, representing the agency, project management, skills like that, and really look at is it adequate, is it okay, does it need a lot of work, and really take a look at sort of where an individual stands on those kinds of things. So you get an assessment of sort of where people's skills are, where their abilities are, what kinds of things they might want to work on. And then you need to start to work on developing that bench. That in the example we had a little earlier with the Head Start director, and there weren't people sort of ready to step in. What are you going to do to sort of work with some of those folks in the Head Start program to make them more ready or make them better able to step in if they're needed? And you want to look at things like stretch assignments, coaching and mentoring. There are formal programs and leadership development programs. There are the 360 survey that we just went through was one way to help with that. Development of individual development plans, job rotation, moving people in and out of different jobs, internal education programs, internal networks. You can have people work internally on specific issues. You can expose people to different groups of their peers, to executive directors of other organizations, more exposure to board members, other decision makers, really sort of widen their frame of reference and widen their experiences. You can give people increased responsibilities, and you can involve people in external educational opportunities. You want to give people the opportunity for trial and error so that people can learn on the job. And it's also important to debrief what was learned, gained, what has changed. In terms of job rotation, cross-functional and vertical responsibility changes. It can be good to throw people into the fire to learn and give them the opportunity to shine in a variety of different situations. You can give people special assignments to develop transferable skills across the agency and the ability to learn on the fly. You want to have people do instead of read or attend. And you also need to make sure that executive directors, managers, supervisors need to make time for coaching, feedback, or mentoring and developing planning with folks involved in the program. So you want a pretty broad program. You don't want to just send people to training and that's it, because you want to think about the 70-20-10 model, and this was a model that was pioneered by the Center for Creative Leadership and really based on like 30 years of study on how executives learn to lead. And it really rests on the belief that leadership is learned through doing and supported. These results have also been supported by the Corporate Learning Council, who conducted research that showed that human beings retain information most effectively when they gain it in a practical context. So formal learning can be most valuable when it supplies the technical skills, theories, and explanations that apply directly to what is learned through experiences, and that it can be integrated into the work environment. So you want to look at 70% of what your leadership development program involves is on-the-job learning, is those stretch assignments, coaching, mentoring, heading up special committees, things like that. And only 10% classroom training. So it's really an experiential approach to developing leadership. And then I mentioned that what you might want to do is really develop an overall agency grid of your leadership development efforts. And this is one way to do it. To really look on the left-hand axis there is performance, how is the person performing in his or her job or his or her special assignment. But then also you want to take a look at leadership behaviors, some of those ability to deal with change, team building, self-awareness, those kinds of things, and really start to look at designing your leadership development program so that you're moving people into that upper right-hand quadrant, that you're trying to develop A-plus players and key talent, that's what you want to do. So it's just one way to sort of think about the overall program and how individuals are progressing through it. Another tool that you want to take a look at is individual development plans, so that you look at where some of those developmental gaps might be and use the plan to sort of focus on those and pair their competencies with what the agency values and what the ethical standards of the organization is. And you want to make sure that potential leaders, that some of your A-plus star future leaders are a shared resource for the organization, that they don't belong to a single manager, that you want to make sure that this is seen by the organization as developing not only the individual, not only the program, but really developing the capacity of the agency. So that's important to keep in mind. The individual development plan can really help employee development because it's a two-way commitment between an employee and their manager, supervisor, or whoever it is that is involved in the leadership development program, and really talks about what they're going to do to grow and develop and increase their skills and abilities. It also gives you something in writing. It's tangible evidence that leadership development is taking place. It's a useful tool that can be monitored and tracked, and really help to drive accountability for development. So the way an individual development program or individual development plan can be constructed, it doesn't have to be anything too complicated. Just setting goals could be to increase my team building skills, and how is that skill related to the organizational goals? Well, the organization their strategic plan is to develop an increased number of partnerships in the community. So what knowledge, skills, and abilities have to be developed? Is it ability to communicate, express a vision, to be a more active listener? What kind of skills do you need to develop? What are you going to do to develop those skills? You're going to practice, you're going to learn, you're going to have other people observe you. What kind of resources need to be put to this? Is there time from your regular work to do this? Is there additional training that has to be done? And how long do we think this is going to take? So again, this doesn't have to be rocket surgery, as my daughter would say. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, but it's a way to organize and think about how people are progressing and what kinds of specific leadership skills are we trying to develop, and how does that fit in with the organization? Does it all hold together? Does it all make sense? So the last thing we want to take a look at is really evaluate the individuals and the program. And anything with the Roma cycle has to have some evaluation in it. So we thought we'd put that here. So as a program progresses, you might spot difficulty within the individuals. There might be a lack of communication or engagement. You don't hear from the person anymore. They don't respond to requests. They sort of are withdrawing from the process. There could be personal issues and outside stressors, outside community, personal or family changes or challenges that could affect someone's ability to continue to participate at the level that they did previously. A lack of follow-through. It's sort of like a lack of engagement, but maybe somebody's bored with it. They've lost their ambition. They're just not following through. And another issue can be maturity issues, poor self-control, lack of self-awareness, or lower underdeveloped emotional intelligence. So those can be some indicators on the individual level that things aren't going well. So what do you need to do? You need to increase feedback and communication. You need to address an issue as soon as it's identified. You need to develop an action plan. So you want to work with the person in one-on-one to reestablish expectations, performance goals, and measurable outcomes. So you want to sort of, okay, so this isn't working. What do we need to do to fix this? How do we need to work together to continue to make progress? You might want to provide different coaching and or mentoring opportunities. Maybe a different and or additional coaches and or mentors might be needed and might be helpful. And you may need to provide new opportunities or challenges. Maybe the area that a person is working in is an area that they just can't excel, or they're burned out, or there isn't enough support. So maybe we need to rethink how we're doing that, and let's take a look at some other opportunities. So you want to sort of evaluate the program in terms of the individuals involved, but you also want to evaluate the program. You want to look at individual progress and make, as I said, those revisions to plans as needed. But you also will want to create a dashboard of indicators that should be reviewed at least every 6 months, and really should come from your commitment early on to establish specific goals and outcomes for the program. So you want to look at things like, are the right people moving into the right jobs at the right time? Is there anyone who's being groomed for too many positions? Is one of the stars of the agency, everyone wants them to move into their position? To what extent are positions being filled internally? Is the leadership development program improving our turnover rate? That's a big indicator. And how many employees are actively engaged in the leadership development program? So these are the kinds of things that you can take a look at to really see whether the program is doing what you want it to do, or what you want to consider as indicators. So you want to continually evaluate the talent is being developed, and you want to move from sort of subjective evaluation to an emphasis on results. And the kinds of things you can look at just in terms of people involved in the program, you can do a dashboard like this that just tells you how many of the high potential people in the organization have resigned and how many have we retained. So losing one is a red, keeping everyone is green. So it's just a quick way to tell whether the program is able to keep people engaged in the program. But sort of a more in-depth and more detailed sort of dashboard is a quick look each quarter at the number of people hired, the number who are external hires, how many are internal hires, how many of the internal hires are folks with individual development plans, and how many key positions are filled. You can add other indicators to this, but it's an easy way to sort of keep track of the program at a glance and develop a dashboard like this as a way to really keep an eye on, are we accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish? Are we hiring people internally? Are we keeping key positions filled? Are we hiring people who have been involved in the leadership development program? You can also get a sense of the success of the program in that it's supporting leadership development, that the IDPs identify areas that are needed, that employees are held accountable to and evaluated on their progress on their individual development plan, and that you're creating sufficient opportunities for employees to gain new leadership skills for on-the-job opportunities like stretch assignments, new projects in existing roles, reporting things to the board that staff might not have reported before. So you really want to end up with opportunities for employees to gain new leadership skills via mentoring and coaching. And again, it's not only to be a recipient or on the receiving end of mentoring or coaching efforts, but mentoring or coaching other employees can be a real way to help develop leadership skills among staff. And that your opportunities are helping to build more capable leaders. Do employees view the organization as a place where they can develop their leadership skills? Employee surveys can start to ask questions like this to really see the overall impact of the leadership development program on the agency. And then when employees do move into a leadership job, are they supported through their transition? Is there support after someone moves into a higher position? Another piece to think about. So that sort of takes us full circle on the leadership development cycle. So after you've evaluated the program, is it doing what we wanted it to do? You want to recommit to the leadership development program and go through the process again, not to as large an extent, but reevaluate the program, make sure it's on target for what you want to accomplish. So really how to get from here to there. As I said, succession planning is sort of looking at the short term. Leadership development is looking at continuous success and ongoing success and more strategic thinking. So you want to move from that short term, oh my goodness, what do we do if the chief financial officer leaves tomorrow, to thinking more long-term development and retention and keeping good staff. And you want to move from sort of an emphasis on whom the agency has to what the agency needs. You want to move from a blockage in positions to appropriate turnover in key positions. You want to be able to reward capable managers of people, enable them to move up within the organization, and move from an insufficient bench strength. So you want to move from our example with the Head Start director having no one ready to perhaps 2 people ready to step in if needed to assume the role of Head Start director, and really help to recognize people's development skills. And I think overall, you want to keep it flexible. You need to be responsive to the agency's needs. You want to really make sure that you develop, nurture, sustain, and promote a culture that supports openness and risk-taking. And that has to, again, it has to start at the executive director level and really have a commitment to that. So, a lot of people have asked me, isn't this a lot of work? Well, the short answer is yes, it is. But it's important to view leadership development not as the addition of a new bureaucratic structure, but as really vital to the agency's mission. Helping low-income individuals achieve economic security is a long and complex process. A silver bullet approach just doesn't work. And the current environment has made the mission of community action even more challenging. In order to be successful, we need leaders throughout the community action network at all levels. at the local level, at the state level, at the regional and national level. And as with other challenges that have faced community action, we can't wait for others to tell us what to do and how to do it. We need to figure out what to do and do it ourselves. Leadership development provides a method for growing new leaders within community action, leaders who can continue to innovate, inspire, and lead community action into the future. We can sustain the efforts of community action only by consciously supporting and adding value to community action's greatest resource, the people who work day to day to fulfill community action's promise. We must build our leadership bench. So I just want to leave you with a final thought is that, if I can, there we go, that short-term and current success without succession and leadership development is really failure. So any questions or comments? You can use the chat feature or question and answer feature on the webinar, or there's my email on the screen now, and this webinar will be posted on the Training and Technical Assistance Partnership site and available to anyone who wants to log on. So thank you all for participating.
And thank you, David. We did provide kind of an additional 15-minute block here in case there were any questions that came up. I'm surprised we have such a quiet group today. So just a couple of quick little announcements while we see if any questions come in at the last second. As Mr. Tucker noted, this is recorded and the presentation will be available on the TNTA Resource Center as well as the Partnerships website. And I wanted to note, again, that the toolkit mentioned throughout Batter Up, Building Your Leadership Bench, is already available. That does include most of the key concepts that we talked about today, as well as some of the very specifics like the position impact, the levels of leadership assessment, that 360 that you can look at. So that is available in the toolkit, as well as you are familiar with the Community Action Partnerships Elite program, Emerging Leaders Institute for Training and Excellence. That levels of leadership is actually used throughout that program. So if you have any questions about that, do let us know here at the Partnership, and we'll be glad to direct you to those resources. If there are questions that come up after, of course, reach out to us at the Partnership or to Mr. Tucker directly. The email is up on the screen. And seeing no questions at this point, I think there's absolutely no harm in getting you back into your busy work days a few minutes early. There will be an evaluation that pops up at the very end, so do let us know what you thought about today's event, what can we do better next time, and what kinds of topics are you most interested in. So with that, thank you everyone, and we hope to see you on another webinar soon.
Thank you all.